Guys, we're back with part 3 of the rainbow body slash immortality slash Jesus was doing mushrooms slash how to be immortal slash drugs. But anyways, before we do start, don't forget to subscribe, click the bell button, and let's continue. This is the last part of our Buy Me a Coffee request.
The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. A study of the nature and origins of Christianity within the fertility cults of the ancient Near East by John Allegro. John Allegro was the number one man appointed by the state of Israel, England, and America in charge of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The top 3 men that were picked in the beginning were all fired because of what they said was in the Dead Sea Scrolls that was not supposed to be said. All 3 men were fired. There is the Amanita Muscara. Here in the catacombs of Rome, under the Vatican, you will find paintings in the old catacombs of the Amanita Muscara being the sacred tree of knowledge of good and evil. Well, the whole concept is if you take the mushroom, it opens up your mind to all kinds of off-the-wall things. Of course, you can talk to God.
The Pope gave me dope. Well, no, the Pope didn't give me dope, and that's exactly what I'm bitching about. Is these religious systems don't give you dope. They don't give you the real thing. They don't give you the manna. They don't give you the bread. They don't give you the fountain of living waters. They don't give you none of it. They give you a bunch of crap instead. Or they give you a wafer and they say, here it is, eat this. This is the gift of God. And you go, oh, nothing happened. Yeah,
exactly.
Totally.
All the vestments of the Catholic Church are remnants of the ancient flag aircraft. They dress like Amanita. The Pope wears his red cap and his red mantle over his shoulders with the white gown. Yeah. It's all over the Catholic Church.
Allegro is a little different case. Do you all know the book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross?
No.
He managed to hypothesize one of the most radical theories ever to come down the pike. I don't know how true it is, but his theory is that Jesus was a mushroom. And, you know, this would not probably...
Even I was like startled. I wanted to write a title for today, and then I heard that, and I'm like, what? If he was doing or taking, that is understandable, but if he is the mushroom itself, then that is even more questionable. Let's go back a bit.
And, you know, this would not probably have cut too much mustard, except that the guy was a Dead Sea Scroll scholar of world renown, had a scholar's grasp of Aramaic and Akkadian, and was fully licensed to be one of the people who tell us what the primary documents of Christianity really mean. The problem was, when Allegro got a hold of them, he said, well, what they really mean is that a sacramental mushroom was being grown in caves by Nabateans down around Qumran, and they called it Jesus in order to befuddle the Roman authorities, and created the cheerful theory of the friendly carpenter who tells us to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. And this was all a publicity stunt just to keep the Roman authorities guessing. And he claims he has textual support for this. The problem is you have to be an Aramaic philologist to follow the argument. The Gnostic temperament is alive and well. In fact, there hasn't been a century as friendly to Gnosticism as the 20th since the 4th. So there you have it. The assumption is that Christ was born in 6 BC under the conjunctio maximus of Jupiter and Saturn. That places, if you believe the Gospels, that he was killed at age 33. That means the crucifixion must have been in 27. Well, there is no reference to Christ outside the Gospels until AD 71. What was happening between 27 and 71? It's damn near 50 years. And the whole thing falls silent. And then what we get in 71 in, I think the Roman, I guess it's in Suetonius. Suetonius, who was a Roman historian and contemporary, he says in a long rap about something else, he says, Jews have recently come to Rome and caused public disturbances at the behest of their leader, Crispus. This is as close as we get. We don't even know if Crispus is Christ. We just accept that this must be so because Suetonius is telling us that Jews of a religious type have come to Rome and caused this agitation. Some people have even wanted that Christianity was invented in the late 60s, and that there never was a person named Christ, that zealots who were preparing the uprising of 69 against the Roman Empire created a mythical figure of a generation earlier and used this mythical figure as a symbol of their rebellion. There is enough material to suggest that Christ was someone's follower, and that what he was saying had been said a generation earlier by someone else of whom we have no trace. And, this is hot, hot stuff, because it just cannot be that way if you're Orthodox.
The presentation of the Jesus character, it's somewhat of a composite of many messianic leaders of the time.
Christianity was invented by a little-known family of Roman Caesars, the Flavians, and they left us documents to prove it. The primary discovery is that the story of Jesus Christ that we have in the Gospels is fiction, and it was based upon a military campaign of a Roman Caesar named Titus Flavius, who waged a war in the 1st century against a messianic movement.
So, which story, like from beginning till end, everything, all that story was created? Right now, the topic is obviously Christian. How about the Islamic story of Jesus? Is that mythical also, or let me know if they research on both sides or just one side and come to the conclusion, or both sides and then came to the conclusion. If you know the answer, please. Thank you.
The reason that the Romans wanted to create their own Savior Messiah is because they wanted to have a pacifistic Christ.
Jesus, as a human being, never existed.
Christianity was used as a political tool to control the masses of the day, and it is still being used this way today.
The Roman Empire made the emperor a god. Well, imagine the cynicism that would pervade our society if you were under state order to light candles to George Bush. I mean, we're free to think of the man as a jackass, and it's not heresy. And the state religion, the religion of the emperor as God, was fairly tolerant. You had to burn a candle to Caesar, but you could also burn a candle to Astarte and Thoth and Hermes and all these other people. What got the Christians in trouble was they wouldn't give Caesar his due, even though it says to do this. They kept claiming that they had some kind of political agenda. They kept expecting the return of a political figure. The Romans hated that because they saw it as a political force. Well, in that situation then, you have to talk about early Christianity to get this stuff in context. People don't understand how shaped our knowledge of the origins of Christianity are, with good reason, because a religion wants you to believe that it's all very cut and dried. there are real mysteries surrounding the birth of Christianity. He said that these zealots were using Amanita muscaria as a sacrament, and that Christ was a symbol of the mushroom, so that they could refer to the mushroom without directly referring to it, so that only the believers would know. John Allegro's case is interesting, but not entirely persuasive. There needs to be more work in this area. There is something going on in the ancient Middle East about mushrooms. Mandaeanism, which is an old cult in that part of the world, forbids the use of mushrooms, which is puzzling since there are none, and they don't forbid much, but they go way out of their way to forbid mushrooms.
Oh, thank God that part
Cleopatra
is
was the
done.
last in a
I couldn't look at the
succession of
screen.
Hebrew Ptolemy kings. Although Cleopatra is considered to be the last of the Egyptian pharaohs, author Ralph Ellis claims that Jesus was the last of the Hebrew pharaohs of Egypt. The historical facts show that the last pharaoh of Egypt was Ptolemy XV, who was nicknamed Caesarion or Little Caesar. Born in 47 BC, Caesarion was the son of two of the most famous parents in world history, Roman ruler Julius Caesar and Egyptian pharaoh Cleopatra. When Caesarion's mother, Cleopatra, proclaimed herself to be the reincarnation of the virgin goddess Isis, Caesarion became the son of a virgin mother goddess. Caesarion's father, Julius Caesar, was elevated to the status of god by the Roman Senate. Caesarion was recognized as the son of God and heir to God's kingdom, the Roman Empire. Caesarion was also recognized as the son of God in Egypt after his mother named him co-ruling pharaoh of Egypt. Cleopatra declared Caesarion to be the king of kings at the age of 13 during the donations of Alexandria ceremony in 34 BC. History suddenly changed when Caesarion's father, Julius Caesar, was stabbed to death by his most trusted men. Octavian, the adopted son of Julius Caesar, swiftly seized power as the new Roman emperor. After Caesar's death, Cleopatra became romantically involved with a married commander from Caesar's army named Mark Antony. Mark Antony and Cleopatra parented 3 children, a twin boy and girl, followed by a second boy. Since Caesarion was Julius Caesar's son and the rightful heir to the Roman Empire, Cleopatra feared for his safety. Caesarion was forced to hide his identity and change his name. The Egyptian name for Jesus is Isu, which means the son of Isis. Since Caesarion was the true heir to the Roman Empire, Emperor Octavian wanted him killed. Selene eventually married and became the Queen of Mauritania. Like her mother Cleopatra, Selene wore the headdress of the goddess Isis. The authenticated ancient scrolls found at the Hemis Monastery near Leh in Kashmir document the life of Saint Isa, leaving home at the age of 13, joining a merchant caravan, traveling the Silk Route, and arriving in India at the age of 14. The Egyptian word for Jesus is Isu. The Greek word is Iesus, and the Arabic word for Jesus is Isa. Isa continued his travels through India and Tibet and the holy cities, where Brahmin priests taught him to read and understand the Vedas. He learned Pali and studied the sacred sutras and how to cure by aid of prayer. He began teaching, performing miracles, and explaining the holy scriptures in monasteries and market bazaars. As an adult, Isa finally left India and Tibet and traveled to Alexandria, Egypt. Selene's half-brother Caesarion finally returned to Egypt after 17 years in hiding. He searched for Selene and found her. He was now called Jesus Christ, a name with the same initials as his father, JC, for Julius Caesar. He told Selene about his plan to capture his father's kingdom, the Roman Empire, which Emperor Octavian had stolen from him. She changed her name from Celine to Magdalene by adding the word Magda to her name, which means high place in Hebrew.
All this makes sense. Like, how do I say it without offending anybody? It's not offensive. It's more like I understand where they're coming from, the people who figured this out, right? It does make sense. Like, if this was the story that everybody was told in Bible school, or I mean in church, it makes sense. We're like, okay, yes, it's true, right? But so you're telling me that Jesus is real, but he's not real at the same time? He's real in the sense that it was political more than religious, more than he was sent from God, right? So they just concocted the story that Joseph is not the father because Mary was a virgin. So they just came up with that story then. Yeah, I just want to see the perspective of a Christian, what they think about this story, and even a Muslim. I want to see how they would react to this video. That's very intriguing for me, actually, because I don't know, maybe they can find something to prove that this is wrong or to prove that this is right, wherever the facts will lie, right? So we'll see.
Jesus Caesarion also searched for and found his two half-brothers, one of whom was Celine's twin. His nickname was Thomas Didymus, which means twin in Greek and Hebrew. 17 years after her suicide, Cleopatra's 4 children were all reunited again. Why are the pages of the Bible silent about where Jesus was and what he did for 17 years from the age of 13 to 30? Jesus Caesarion learned the art of healing and meditation in India.
The Zadokим are the ultra-righteous wing of
So
the
that's why he
Essene
became immortal.
movement. They believed in human perfection.
Had the rainbow body.
In other words, that humans can become whole, holy, and complete, just like Adam and Eve. In the Gnostic belief, in the Garden of Eden story, Adam and Eve did not have bodies of flesh and blood. They had light bodies. And as a punishment, the Old Testament God Yahweh created coats of skin for humanity, the flesh and blood bodies that we inhabit.
That's what I
The
learned
Gnostics
also
were
in
intent
the
on
Islamic way.
reclaiming our original primordial light bodies. And this is what the Zadokim referred to as perfection, returning to our original perfection. And this is very difficult for some people. They look at this and think, well, who are you to become perfect? Nobody's perfect. But the Zadokim believed that humans could transform themselves into perfect light beings, actually returning to our original condition. Gnosticism was attacked and destroyed by Christian orthodoxy because it claimed it possessed the secret teachings of Jesus, of the living Jesus, the risen or resurrected Jesus. Gnosticism also promotes the idea that any individual can have a direct, personal, and visionary experience with the risen Christ. If you can have that, what do you need a pope for? What do you need a priest for? What do you need a church hierarchy for? You don't. The church sells the past Jesus, the past actions. Gnosticism says, let's go into the future. Let's move forward. Today we are experiencing a dramatic revival of Gnosticism worldwide. We're recovering knowledge of the Gnostic Gospels, where we recovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, and now the public literature is starting to open up to the real secret teachings of Jesus, which is absolutely phenomenal.
Ayahuasca and magic mushrooms are incredible.
So when we don't know if it's true or not, but how would you explain, regardless of if it's true or not, for the people, obviously, that we learned that Jesus was supposedly or is sent from God, he's the messenger. How do you explain where, how does the Gnostic or Gnosticism explain God? I mean, the teachings of Jesus Christ when he was teaching of God, or maybe their rebuttal will be he wasn't teaching about God, or he wasn't preaching about God. He was preaching about being a rainbow body. Maybe that will be their rebuttal if I ask a question like that. So why was God talking about, I mean, why was Jesus talking about this, that, and the third? And they'll be like, no, it's just what people wrote, but it's not necessarily the truth. Maybe that's what they're gonna say. But you let me know.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Ayahuasca and magic mushrooms are incredible and life-changing for many people. If you have never had a real distinctive spiritual experience, they can provide it. It is one thing to read about the spiritual experiences of Jesus or Krishna or Muhammad, and another to have your own.
The central perception of Gnosticism, no matter how you slice it, is that we don't belong here, that we are strangers, that something terrible happened, and that accounts for why we're here, that we were destined for a much better deal, and something went terribly, terribly wrong. It takes different forms. Then the
Watson wrote a very convincing book to show that the Eleusinian mysteries were a cult of ergot intoxication. I thought that sounded totally crazy before I read the book. I thought that it was going to be some flung together case that would convince nobody. Actually, I can't believe that it's anything else. Having read the book, the evidence is overwhelming. Well, Eleusis was the central wellspring of mystery for the Western mind for 2,000 years. Everybody who was anybody went to Eleusis and had the experience. And there were times when the mystery was profaned to the point that writers can speak of wealthy Athenians who had the mystery in their house, were able to offer it to their guests after dinner. Well, what kind of mystery is this? And John Allegro wrote a much less convincing book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, trying to say that Christianity itself was a mushroom cult. In fact, going much further than that, saying that Christ himself was in fact no person at all, but a system of coded epigrams for a mushroom. His case is harder to judge because it depends on a knowledge of Aramaic philology.
in the Avestan classical period, no one would have dreamed of having a spiritual experience without resort to drugs. They just put it very plainly. They're the most matter-of-fact people. These texts are fascinating, but they don't devalue it. They say, here's our map of the spirit world entirely based on our drug experiences, and here are the drugs we use, and to see these angels you must use this drug, and to see these angels this drug, and so forth. We don't really know what these drugs were because the etymologies are lost, but harmaline figures very strongly in all of this, and of course harmaline is a neurotransmitter present in human metabolism. That's all it would take, because in the human pineal gland, there is a compound called adenosine. That's what the enzymologists call it. But when you show it to a plant biochemist, he says it's 6-methoxy-tetrahydroharmalan. And so it is. Adenosine and 6-methoxy-tetrahydroharmalan are the same thing. Well, it's a psychedelic harmine alkaloid, similar to what's in Pergamon harmala. It could be converted to DMT by a simple methylation. Well, a one-gene mutation would make a methylation possible. Gordon Wasson, he decided Soma was this mysterious, ecstatic, hallucinogenic plant that the Rig Vedas were basically composed about. The major subject of the Rig Vedas is Soma. The 9th mandala of the Rig Veda is a paean of praise to Soma, that it exalts it above all the other gods. And no one knows what Soma was. And the descriptions are puzzling. It seems to have been, it didn't have leaves. It had yellow flowers. It grew in the mountains. And they speak of pressing it. It was prepared some way. It was pressed. It was filtered. And then they talk about this golden liquid which they drank. And Gordon Wasson, because of the importance of the Indo-Aryan people who wrote the Vedas for connecting up all of the history of what archaeologists call Old Europe with the Neolithic Middle East and India, it was very important to try and understand what Soma was.
Hypercarbylation, for such we had named the process of altering the neural DNA and changing a human being into an eternal hyperdimensional being. Hypercarbylation was to be the shamanic defeat of death, that those doorways the dead enter through daily were finally to be thrown open to a hypercarbonated humanity that would then have freedom of movement to and from an eternity in which the species was a living reality.
A philosophy called Hermeticism that was developed in the 1st and 2nd centuries by Gnostic thinkers, Greeks, Jews, people inside the Roman Empire as it was beginning to show the first signs of degradation and decay. Philosophers drew back from the rise of Christianity with its doctrine of the fall of man and original sin and the stain of Adam and Eve and that whole thing, and took a different tack and made 2 points which I think we need to recover and live out for ourselves. And the first point was that man, which means men and women, human beings, are divine beings, not lower than the angels, higher than the angels. The message of the alchemical and hermetic thinkers, and the Corpus Hermeticum actually uses the phrase, man is God's brother. We have no idea what it would mean in our own lives if we could throw off the notion of ourselves as fallen beings. We are not fallen beings. When you take into your life the gnosis of the light-filled vegetables, the psychedelic plants that have stabilized the sane societies of this world for millennia, the first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
Okay, that was a very interesting topic. There's some points that are really interesting, and I do believe in it, but there's some points that I'm not necessarily a big fan of. It doesn't mean like I hate the people who believe in that, but I'm just not on board, right? One man's meat is another man's poison, I would say. There are some parts that obviously I'm not going to accept until proving otherwise. The whole Jesus thing, he probably is a rainbow body, to be honest, but not in the way that the drugs and all that. I mean, I'm choosing not to believe in that. That's my choice, right? I can choose to believe in something and not to believe in others. So I believe in the whole rainbow body, so and so, right? Because I love divinity, I love enlightenment, spirituality, and all that stuff. Before my reaction videos, I was in that. I'm still, but also religious at the same time. So, anyways, yeah, like he's Christ. He definitely is special. Obviously, if you're a messenger of God, you're definitely like, obviously, like a rainbow body, right? I don't know how to describe it anymore. So yes, for that. But the whole doing mushrooms and all that shenanigans, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. So, you know, what else? Ooh, I like the whole concept of the you know, of the enlightenment aspect of it, but I don't like the drug aspect of it. Because I'm not the biggest fan of substance, right? I'm not the biggest fan of substances, so I don't encourage that for enlightenment. I feel like enlightenment should be done like naturally, right? Without any help. If you can get into a higher version of yourself without any substances, I feel like it's pure and divinity, pure enlightenment. That's for me. I mean, maybe some people do need help, which it's fair, because in our life we do take medicine to help us like heal, right? Because our body doesn't heal on its own. It should heal on its own, but sometimes we can't heal on our own. So maybe in that circumstance it makes sense. But the reason why I don't agree with that is because some people are going to take that and make it an excuse to do drugs. That's the only reason why I don't agree with it. Because they're going to take something pure as this and then flip it and be like, oh, you know what? Let's be spiritual because we can do mushrooms and da da da. And then we will start fighting for mushroom to be legal so that we can take it. Like, they're not using it for the right reasons, and that's why I'm not the biggest fan, right? So maybe it's real, but people are just so selfish, you know. We just take something and then we just try to gain something out of it. So yeah, that's the reason why. There's one thing that I wanted to talk about, but I don't remember. Oh God, please help me with my brain. Something. I need to write things down because I forget easily. Yeah, if I remember, I'll let you know, guys, in the comments. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and if you want to have a priority request, check Buy Me a Coffee, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.